I like this idea of open-endedness. So I think that's intrinsic to life, and it comes with the territory, right? So when people talk about eternal life, it's a bit like an oxymoron, yeah. So I usually play this game with some of my students. Say, okay, I'm going to say a word. You need to say the opposite quite quickly, like good, bad, And I'm saying to them death, and everybody says life, and I'm saying wrong, and they're like, "What do you mean? It's like the opposite of death is life." I say, "No, the opposite of death is birth, yeah, and life is what stays between birth and death. So it's intrinsic to a system to have an end and a beginning, to have something in between." Yeah, and I think that's probably that you're seeing with the heaven thing, right? It's like you wouldn't be aware that you're alive, but you are doing things by just being in an infinite flat way. For that awareness to occur, you need, and this is something beautiful comes from some. Because I like science and philosophy, but also I like art, because it's sometimes you get, as I said, very different perspective from art. And writers like Dostoevsky, they say something like that. They will say, well, actually, you can't really be aware of the light if there is some darkness somewhere in the corner. And there's the contrast between the two that actually gets you the experience that you have right now. And I think that's the idea that I see in your saying, Mike, about the open-endedness, right? I need to have some sort of there is openness, but there is also endedness, yeah? So there is an end there, which is open, but has to be, it's like the contrast that gives you, like the access to it. And another question that I keep asking, because I like to work a bit on this idea that, well, as a philosopher, I realize philosophers are obsessed with death. It's like, where am I going when I'm going to die? What I'm going to do after? But I think a really interesting question is like, where was I before being born? It's like, who am I? Where am I coming from, right? And that's kind of like this idea of birth was coming into existence, kind of like completely ignored. I mean, almost ignored from there. And the birth is missing, yeah, from philosophy. Death is present, but the birth is not there. And the thing is, like, can I have one without another? Because life is what stands in between. And one of the reasons why the birth is not, yeah, because I think, going back to, I'm a female philosopher, so this means that, the thinking in philosophy has been dominated by male thinking for centuries. Yeah, so the entire conceptual toolbox we're operating right now has been inherited through a tradition that has ignored half of the humanity embodiment, female embodiment. So this means that we might have different problems and different takes on the problems that we have by just simply taking in a different perspective, a different questioning, right? And for me, one of the things that are missing, like the big elephant in the room, it's like the invisible face of the moon, is like the birth. It's like the beginning into life, yeah. And I think that the two are interconnected, yeah. So the aging means also the very notion of aging means that there is a beginning somewhere. So it's like I know that we are obsessed with the ending because we know that's going to end, and we never knew that we're going to begin. Yeah. So that's something that is like out of it's like nobody asked my permission to bring me to life. I just show up some way or another. And it's like in this particular time space, which actually I'm lucky because this particular time space, I can go to school and at the university as a female, yeah, and in a country that I can do that. But if it was 300 years ago, we don't have this conversation, yeah. And I think we need to point it out, yeah, because it's important. So that's the starting point. I think it's kind of like missing because again, this idea of balance, yeah, between the two, and the communication, and going back to the carrot cake, yeah. You said it's like the layers are nice. Well, it depends on taste. I mean, some people don't like the layers cake. Some people like more like the mixture. Have almonds and carrots and stuff, and maybe some things are more like the gelatin one, or more fluid. There are lots of forms of life, not just the ones that we have. The only thing I would like to stress, which I think is really important, whatever we do, whether we like it or not, we do it from our perspective. Yeah. So we humans investigate things. God knows, maybe also, I don't know, maybe cats also, they have their own science, and they have their own communication between them that I actually completely miss. They have their own internal university thinking, and we have no access to it. But so our access is necessarily through our own perspective.